Hi everyone. Today we are going to talk about legal career in Canada. Meeting moderator Mykyta Zhukov, it's me, co-founder of Canadian-Ukrainian Legal Alliance, and our speakers Gina Alexandris, special advisor at Adjunct faculty Lincoln Alexander School of Law, founder and CEO at Gina Alexandris Coaching and Consulting. And our next speaker is Yonida Koukio, associate at Oziel Law. In the focus of our event, how to build a successful legal career in Canada as a foreign lawyer, what skills should a modern lawyer possess, interesting legal niches and specialties for foreign lawyers in Canada, transformation of the legal market in Canada, what new directions and opportunities are open up in 2023, artificial intelligence, intellectual property of bloggers and influencers, copywriting, and so on. Before we move on to our speakers, I would like to say a few words about our organization, Canadian-Ukrainian Legal Alliance. Our mission is to connect and empower Ukrainian and Canadian legal professionals through collaboration, professional development, and the exchange of knowledge and ideas. Presently, we are focused on supporting Ukrainian lawyers in their legal career in Canada. But in our foreseeable plans is also work to strengthen the ties between Canada and Ukraine and contribute to the growth of both nations' legal professions. And we are glad to see a lot of viewers in our webinar. If you will have any question for our speakers, you can ask them at the end of our event. I will mention it additionally. You can also write your questions in the chat or turn on your audio and camera and ask questions. Please keep your microphones muted throughout the webinar, except during the closing period when you can ask questions. So we move on to our speakers. Our first speaker, Gina Alexandris, you are welcome. You have the floor, and please tell us about how to build a successful legal career in Canada as a foreign lawyer. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mykyta, and hello to everybody. If you could in the chat, just to let us know what stage you're at. So are you in the NCA process? Are you in the licensing process? Are you in neither of those processes? Or are you perhaps already past those processes? It'll just give us a little bit of direction, I think, as we move forward. I'm going to start with the foundation, Mykyta, and Yonida, who has experienced this firsthand, will add her experiences directly to it. But one of the things for anybody who's in this process, who is educated and trained and licensed abroad, who now comes to Canada and wants to become a lawyer here in Canada, what do you have to do? The reminder is to ensure that you have an understanding, a clear understanding of the two very separate steps that are required. The first is the accreditation process, and I'll come back to that in a second. And the second is the licensing process. They're quite different, but both are part of the process as we move forward. So in the accreditation process, and if this is something that everybody knows, my apologies, and we just want to make sure that everybody's on the same platform, especially for Ukrainian lawyers, where there's a civil system in place from where you're trained from. Coming to Canada, the requirement for licensure in most of the provinces, there's a couple of exceptions, is to have a common law degree. And so one of the things that has to happen is an accreditation of your credentials based on a common law review. And so what happens for many of the lawyers who are from civil jurisdictions, trained in civil jurisdictions, is that they usually are not eligible to be considered for an NCA accreditation until they do some additional training. So what does that mean? I know of foreign trained lawyers who have done one of two routes. One is to start the JD process from the beginning and go through the full 3 years of a JD degree in a Canadian law school. It's a choice that some people make depending on their experiences, their circumstances, and that takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. I won't go into that in detail because it's not a choice that most people make, but it is an opportunity, an option that I wanted to put on the table. If you are thinking about it, for any Ontario schools, the deadline tends to be November 1st, the year before you want to start the 3-year program. And outside of Ontario, the deadlines typically range January to February of the year that you want to start the 3-year program. So let me just put that aside, because most people say, I've already done a law degree, I don't want to do a law degree again. Well, if you're from a civil background, the usual route would be for the accreditation piece is to take an LLM so that you can then be eligible to apply to the National Committee of Accreditation for an evaluation of your credentials. And the LLM typically will require you to do Canadian law courses, administrative law, criminal law, constitutional law in particular, and then there's other courses that are required as well. And so it can be quite a long process. And one of the things that I would encourage anybody who's engaging in it is to get the facts first. I can remember a conversation that Yonida and I had when she first arrived, where we sort of laid it all out, what's necessary, and then you can make your decisions if you know what's necessary. Accreditation is the first part. Exams in the law schools or exams in the NCA process tend to be fact-based exams. And if that's something that you've never done before, you want to be able to become familiar with that. So I'll leave that for the accreditation piece, but it's a really large first step if you're thinking about becoming a lawyer in Canada. The next step, the licensing piece, here in Canada is provincially mandated. So I don't know if we have people, if you're participating, if you're anywhere outside of Ontario, but each province, and it would be good to see in the chat where people are watching from, each province has its own law society that sets its own regulations. But in essence, for the licensing piece, the mandatory requirements are twofold for the most part. One is a period of an internship, usually called articling, which can be done in Ontario through something called the Law Practice Program or articling itself. And then separate from that, licensing exams, the bar exams as we typically know them. It varies from province to province in terms of how long articling or a placement might be, how many exams there might be. So just so that you know, those two are the components of the licensing part. Once you have your accreditation from the NCA or have gone to a law school and have gotten the Canadian equivalency or the Canadian common law requirement, then you apply to licensing and complete those two elements. One of the tricky parts of Mykyta, as I'm sure people have realized, is that the timing, there's sometimes some overlap. So while you're in one process, you have to be thinking to the next process and applying, and have to be thinking to the following process to apply to be in time for any articling or summer opportunities. So you need to have ahead of you, at least know what's required so you can start planning it stage by stage. Let me just pause there. And Yonida, I know that you had some examples, I think, of your own experience, because before I turn it over to Yonida, one more comment. There's two other things that internationally educated lawyers can think of doing, and I want to put that on the table. So one is to become a lawyer in Canada. The other is to continue practicing their law in the province of Ontario or in any other province as a foreign legal consultant. And that is a road that some people choose to do. And that requires certain applications and requirements with the law society of your choice. And the third option, and Yonida, I know that your partner has traveled this road, is to decide, I'm now in Canada. There's so many other opportunities. This is my chance to pivot and to either do a law related or law adjacent role in something else that interests me, or to pivot away from law entirely. And I know that we were talking about becoming a successful lawyer in Canada, but I think it's important for us to, as we think about it, just to remember what all of our options are as we move forward. Yonida, your experience though.
Thank you, Gina. I think that was a great summary, which you gave me when I moved to Canada in January 2016, somewhere around that time. And what was helpful that you told me that I hadn't really realized was that it's going to take me the same amount of time if I decided to do a JD or I decided to do the LLM process and the accreditation. And you were so right. and I hadn't appreciated how much time it would take. So I think Gina presented the steps, which is very important for someone who is considering this to know. When I moved here, I had read the National Committee on Accreditation requirements online, and I thought that it's going to be easy to tackle. I would come here, I would figure it out. It wasn't so easy after all. You can achieve it, but you have to be aware of the best way to go about it is to speak with people that have gone through the process, and they can prepare you better. I think I didn't do that part. If I were to redo the whole process, I would probably get more information before I jumped. So what I was going to say is that understanding the steps is very important. Knowing that it may take a bit more time than you had in mind, it might be years. Also knowing that you don't have to be a lawyer, you can use those skills to do something else in Canada. There are so many other positions that would use someone that has a legal background to help them with other things. We can discuss this later today. But in terms of, let's say that you want to become a lawyer and you go through that process, in terms of the skills to build a successful legal career, something that may help someone to meet the requirements, but also to plan for later, is to develop a network. And I think this is a bit different from what I was used to in Greece, where you know who you know and you don't really see it as network. It's your friends or your colleagues. Here, you may not know many people. So how you go about to build that network, it can be a bit tricky. You have to be familiar with how you approach someone here, how you send them a Zoom or a calendar invite, which I'm seeing a lot of students who want to reach out to me. They send me an email, but they don't send me a calendar invite. So those little things to understand how you approach someone you may not know, cold email them, or you leverage a connection to tell them about who you are and what you want from them. So how you build this network has its own particularities that you can become familiar with. But when you reach to that network, what I was going to say that you need to be a bit more specific, because I made this mistake in the past. I met people and I said, I'm Yonida and I moved to Canada and I want to become a lawyer. And it's very hard for that person to connect you to opportunities because, well, no one is looking for a lawyer. People are looking for a specific lawyer. So when you jump to a different jurisdiction, maybe there's a lot of soul searching to be done, in my opinion, if you want to become a lawyer and understanding what's involved, but also what area do you want to practice? Do you want to keep practicing that area that you practice back home? For me, it was litigation, and I knew that I didn't want to do that here. So building the expertise to transition to a new area is also challenging because basically you're perceived as someone with no experience. So these were going to be my two high-level points: that understand what you want to do here, which may require you to speak with different people for them to share what their experience has been, because you may have something different in mind, and build a very strong network. And understand that it may take time, so be prepared for that, and distinguish perhaps a survival job with a career. And understand that the survival job is going to help you pay the bills while you are building that network and perhaps doing an LLM or getting those skills to get there in the next 1, 2, 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Gina, you are the embodiment of how a foreign lawyer can build a highly successful legal career in Canada. You have an impressive track record, and personally, it's evident to me that a good and effective network is a key component of success in career and business. What secrets of successful networking can you share with us?
Yonida, to you first, or?
I can start first, then share my mistakes. So when I moved here, I thought that networking was attending a million events. I think I was attending 3 events per week when I was everywhere. I would find an event and I would take probably a friend of mine and I would go there. The interaction with the lawyers around me was probably zero. I was just there learning what's happening, and I attended a lot of AI and the future of law events. For me, were fascinating. I didn't interact with anyone in the room, or probably I added everyone on LinkedIn. Again, I didn't interact further with them. And I thought that that was networking. and that's not networking. I feel like the hardest part is to create those one-on-one connections. You go to an event, or you may not go to an event, but you meet someone, and the chances of that person remembering you are very low unless you cultivate that relationship. So, and you have to understand how many people you can build strong relationships with, because it's the strength that is more important than the number of people you know. So getting back to that person, someone that impressed you because you want to grow in that area of expertise, you follow up and you say, I saw you at this event. I think you've built a very impressive career. I would want to pick up your brain for me to end up in that career as well. And if you can share your insights, and you meet with that person, and you create a chain of interactions with that person. You perhaps follow up and you say, hey, I saw this article, I thought of you. Or is there someone in your area or in your industry or your community that you think that I should speak based on where I want to end up? And when they connect you to that someone, which is the best way to create a network, like to be referred, like a warm referral, than just cold emailing someone, follow up with that person and say, hey, I met with that person that you recommended. They were very helpful. By the way, here's where I'm at in my process. So you keep them involved in where you are, and you bring them to your journey. And when you are in a position that you can ask something specific of them, like I did this when I completed all my requirements. I didn't ask for a job from anyone, but when 3 or 4 years later, after I completed all of the steps, I went back to my network that I had built all those years, and I said, I'm finally in a position where I can work in Canada. It was a pandemic then, and I didn't have a job. So at that point, I said, I have an ask. I have something to ask you, and it was very explicit. I want you to connect me with that person in your firm that does something specific. That I could reach out by myself, but the chances that I would be ignored were higher. And this is what they did. And whenever I met with some person, I always thanked the person that connected me. I said, I met with them, they were very helpful. By the way, here's where I'm at. And you keep doing this until you actually don't need this anymore. But I think this is the best way to build a network where people remember you. And you don't really see it as you always asking something of them, because in those meetings with them, you learn about them, and you keep them top of mind when you see opportunities that can help them as well. So this was a very long answer to this question.
Yonida, I think it's really important to hear people. You said something very, very key that I wanted just to reiterate, which is a network isn't about asking somebody just for a job. A network, what we mean by a professional network, is building that professional relationship. And I want people to remember that there can be different levels, because you said it, Yonida, as well. How many people can you have in your network? You can have thousands of people in your network, but each of them will be at a different level. There are some that are your constant go-tos. There are some that you're going to know on LinkedIn and maybe remember them on LinkedIn. And there are others who will be sort of in the periphery. And that's okay, because you don't know when your paths will cross at some point in the future. But each of those different levels of connection need a different kind of engagement on a regular basis. And networking really is something, networking and professional development is something that I would ask each of you to think of, not as something that you do extra on top of your job, but as part of your role as a lawyer. It has to be part of that experience as a lawyer. Just as you're serving your clients, you are serving yourself as well in building that professional network. And so if we think about networking as building professional relationships over the course of a lifetime, Yonida, I know you said, once you get that job, you don't need to necessarily network as much, but I would say that you keep doing it as much as you can. There'll be periods in time of your life. I know that when I had my son I was great at networking before I had my son. And then for a period of about 5 or 6 years, I kind of went off the radar. I was focused on my job, focused on my child, and really networking was not top of mind. But then I realized that I needed to kick that back in again. And so doing that again afterwards at different stages and in different levels is really, really important. And Yonida's comment about not asking for a job, get to know the individual. I actually have notes on people, whether it's in my contact on the phone. I will say they love soccer, or they have a place in Greece that is a place that I know, for example, or they love this kind of wine. Little notes that when I see them again, or if I see something that may or may not be law related, I can send to them and share with them. It's really, and it's got to be authentic though. You're not sending them something just so that you can get ahead. you're really sending them something to develop that relationship with them. But having that information for me is also a reminder, oh yeah, this is what we connected about at that time that I went. When Yonida mentioned going to lots of events, getting out there, the one positive that I hope, Yonida, you got from it was to at least see the people that were involved, even if you didn't necessarily make the connections. You got to learn the names of the people who were going there, see who was going to the different activities and the different events. But what I would say is, if you're a little more reserved or shy, or you think, I don't like having to meet strangers, always think about taking a buddy. Find a person that you're there with. Not that you're going to stay with the whole time, but that they can act as the person who introduces you. Oh, this is my friend Yonida. She's a lawyer at Oziel Law, and I'd like you to chat with her for a bit. If you go with somebody, it makes it a little bit easier, especially for those who might be a little bit more reserved. And the only other thing that I want to say, because I know we've got lots to cover, is one of the things that I always advise people is when you are having a meeting with somebody, if you're having, if you met them at an event, or if you're having an information meeting because you were met somewhere and then you're contacting them for that coffee that Yonida said, I would always try to, at the end, ask them if there would be 2 or 3 other people in their network that they would think might be helpful for you to be introduced to. Sometimes people will say, let me think about it, I'm not sure. Other times they'll say, oh yeah, here are 3 or 4 people, let me do a virtual introduction. But by asking your one person for 2 or 3 other names, that expands your network slowly. And if you do that each time, it helps build that network. I wonder how people are feeling about networking, if people are a little unsure about it or unnerved about it, or if they recognize it as a valuable and necessary tool of professional development in Ontario and in Canada in particular. And if they can pop that into the chat. But Mykyta, does that give you some answers about networking?
Yeah, I see that we have some question at the chat, but I think that you can answer for these questions at the end of our event. And as we know that Canadian legal market is highly competitive, and for this reason, how can foreign lawyers differentiate themselves in the Canadian legal market? As for you,
I'll start off, and Yonida, you can add to it. But I think there are a couple of things that I would want to say. First of all, understanding what the market is like. So doing your research, speaking to people, as Yonida said, really getting a handle of what the market is like in wherever you are. And I don't know where people are from, if they're in Ontario or in other provinces, but getting a handle on what we mean by the legal market in Ontario, I'll use that example, is really important. I remember speaking with a number of foreign trained lawyers who, when we talk about the size of the firms, for example, I would say, what does a large firm mean to you? And I would get a variety of responses. Some people, depending on their experience, would say, oh gosh, 20 is a really large firm in my jurisdiction. Or others would say 5 is a really large firm. And others would say, oh no, 100 is a large firm. And then when I'd say to them, you know that there are some firms here in Ontario that have 400 people, the look on their face would be just of shock. And so understanding the different types of arrangements or organizations, understanding the market itself, I think is really important. The other part that I would say is we are a jurisdiction where French and English are the language of our profession, and law is a profession of language. And so whether it's oral or whether it's written, improving or ensuring that you have really strong oral and written communication skills is going to be critical. It seems so trite, but if you send an email or if you send a resume or a cover letter and it has a number of, or even just a few, not even a number of typographical or spelling or grammatical errors, that speaks to you, that speaks about you. And people will tend to overlook it a couple of times, but not if it happens on a repeat basis. So if you're unsure, ask a trusted friend to give you their honest feedback about your writing or about your oral presentation skills. And I'm going to just put something on the table here. I'm not talking about accents at all. We all have accents. We all have accents, but how you use the language, how you communicate, how you are both able to understand and be understood is what I mean by communication skills. And those really have to be exceptional. I've seen internationally trained lawyers who may not recognize the challenge that they have in that area and not willing to do something about it. And that becomes problematic. And the only other thing that I'll say is about skills for new lawyers or modern lawyers, something called emotional intelligence or soft skills. And I won't go into it. I could talk about this for hours, but many people understand that law is a logical profession and it's a substantive profession. You have to know what you're dealing with, and that's absolutely true. That's the intelligence quotient, IQ. It's important. But everybody also here understands that that's sort of a level playing field. We expect people to have the substantive knowledge. What gets people over and above is the emotional intelligence that they will bring to it, the soft skills, the understanding skills, understanding how to be persuasive, how to manage their own emotions, how to manage the emotions of clients, how to develop other people as well as themselves. Those soft skills are absolutely critical in the practice of law, where what we are dealing with in law is all about people. Think about the relationships, whether it's with another lawyer, a supervising lawyer, a lawyer that reports to you, a clerk that supports you, a client, a judge, an opposing counsel, the people at the courthouses, if you're in litigation, the people who are in the registry offices. Understanding relationships and being able to manage those well is a critical skill that professionals, new lawyers, need to have. Yonida, what about you? What do you think about these?
I completely agree with what you mentioned, Gina, and most importantly, understanding your own limitations. And sometimes you're not aware of it. When I moved to Canada, I thought that I spoke English. I probably didn't speak good enough English. And you improve, of course, but you don't know what you don't know until you actually find out. So be open, and emotional intelligence is very important, especially understanding your own emotions in the process, because there were a lot of times that I felt like it was personal and it wasn't personal. Someone was just giving me feedback for me to improve. Like it didn't impact their lives. So as you will come here with experience, and I think that's the hardest part, because there would be times that experience may not be recognized. And people, there is this notion in Canada that you need to have Canadian experience, or people will ask for it, or will ask for them to see that you are willing to translate that experience that you may have. So that may include you taking some steps back. Maybe even if you want to become a lawyer and you want to go through the process of articling or doing that training, you may have been a partner back home or someone that had appeared before the Supreme Court. And here, they might appreciate that, but they will not hire someone based on that experience. So they need to know that you can be trained, and that means that they need to see the student in you. And that's a bit hard when you have that experience to present yourself as someone who is eager to learn, bring their notepad everywhere they go and track the questions and become that student. And I have I meet with a lot of lawyers, and I think I was at that stage at some point in my life when I was a bit bitter and hurt for people not understanding what I bring to the table, until I understood that you have to give them what they're looking from you. And I think it benefits you in the long run. So I understood that if they needed to see the student in me, well, I could just keep going and not be that person, or I could learn from this experience and see how I can grow. And I see a lot of lawyers that speak to me and they say, I don't want an article. I have the experience. I want to go for an abridgment and I will figure it out. And I flag with them that this may seem a bit faster now, but I don't think there is something like skipping steps in the process. At some point, you will need to show that you have experienced the practice law in Canada. And you may bring industry expertise, or you may bring a niche, and you may be amazing at that. But if you don't know the fundamentals of Canadian law or common law and how that industry expertise can be applied based on new principles, then someone may not be able to trust you in the same way you would expect them, or your assumptions might be wrong sometimes because you come with a different system in mind. So how to be competitive? I would say understand what you want to do in this process. Do you want to start from scratch and to become someone in the next 5 years? Again, think, be forward looking. And what skills do you require? So soul searching, where are you at? Where do you need to go? What do you need to learn in the process? And you may be amazing, or like you may pick up the industry or like the legal very fast, the legal knowledge, but you also have to understand the market, like Gina said, because you may be doing everything, but then you don't understand the recruitment cycles, or the fact that how do you find an article in position? Well, most firms, bigger firms, usually start by hiring back their summer students, and this process starts 2 years before. So are you willing to play with those by those rules, or are you don't care? So competitive means substantive, but also that emotional intelligence, and that need to be a hustler. I think you need to understand and to just tick every box of this process. And it's not necessarily just knowledge. It's or like substantive knowledge, is industry knowledge, the legal market knowledge, the people, how does it work, who hires you, who are the gatekeepers. So it's a lot of things that you need to figure out. And as Gina said at the beginning, is you're doing these things as you are preparing for the next thing. And you are always, and it's not just this, you also have to find a job. You also have to figure out your immigration process. It's a lot of things that are happening at the same time. So, and it's very easy to be overwhelmed and to drop the ball. And but from all the people that I met during this process, they figured it out somehow. They figured out their immigration while they didn't know what they're going to do with their job, while they're doing the licensing. So you can figure it out. But you have to be aware that there are going to be a lot of moving pieces along the way, and you have to be ready to embrace this.
What is your opinion on the necessity for lawyers to acquire other specialized knowledge in addition to the legal knowledge? For example, if you specialize in copywriting law, you may need to acquire knowledge of the arts, or if you work in the legal tech, you may need to learn programming or coding. How essential is this for a future lawyer, for modern lawyer?
I think it really varies from from industry to industry. Part of it is understanding what really is a requirement. So does an intellectual property lawyer need to have a science background? Do they need to have an arts background? Does a lawyer who's helping businesses start up need to have experience in starting up their own business? Not necessarily. And I think to some degree, Mykyta, it's understanding what's required. It's speaking to people in the industry to see how do they get there. And if there is something that's a gap, then what is the best way of filling that gap, and when, right? You may not be able to bring everything to the table right away. You may have to do it a little bit at a time, because these things take time and energy and money. Let's be realistic about that. And so I think, do you need to have I'm going to make this comment as well. Don't completely negate the experience that you bring from another jurisdiction. You have to understand the local market, absolutely, but there certainly can be some transferable information that you can bring. But I think people want to rush to be the perfect fill in the blank, IP lawyer, AI lawyer. Perfection, in my mind, is overrated. And I think if you can get to really good and excellent, you're doing really well. But that takes time, and it takes some inquiry as to what that might be. And it takes a willingness. I'm going to make this comment and people can disagree. The entrepreneurial mindset that a lot of people bring to the study of law means that you might fail at something. And you know what? It's okay to fail. You're going to try something, whether it's an exam, whether it's a path that you've taken. Pick yourself up, learn from that mistake, and then move forward. But that ability to fail, I think, would serve you much better than the ability to get everything done right away and then just overwhelm yourself.
Absolutely. I agree with that. From my experience, when I was when I moved to Canada, I liked IP a lot. So I was going to law firms to ask them, would you hire someone with no engineering or science background? Because in Greece, you just go to law school, you don't have a background. And they would be like, of course, apply, of course. And of course, I was never hired, but also all my friends that were going through the process and didn't have that background were also not hired. You can think of it as a coincidence, but at the same time, I would get the feedback from all of my friends, and they would say that the firms that actually said apply, they ended up hiring someone with a science and engineering background. So I would just trust the market of who is hired for what. When I was trying to find a job, and Gina, you mentioned something before about reaching out to those 5 people that someone can connect you to. I realized this a bit too late. I realized this when I was jobless, that this is the way to go about it. Every person you meet, they should connect you with someone. You should ask them to connect you with someone. So when I was trying to get through COVID, finding a job, and I wanted to do I wanted to do technology law, but I had some experience in legal technology. And when I was speaking with people and getting those insights and understanding what it actually meant on a day-to-day basis, what I wanted to do and what they were doing, and eventually leveraging those insights to find a position, the firm that actually hired me, they hired me for knowing a bit more. So it always helps. They always see you a bit more competitive if you understand the technicalities. Like you're helping a startup build something, a software. Where if you understand the steps, you would become a better lawyer in drafting those agreements because you would know what IP is involved, what licenses are involved. And when you demonstrate that knowledge, you can persuade a potential employer, but also a potential client that you know what you're doing and you can guide them and they can trust you. So I will go back to understand what you don't know, where you want to adapt and get those skills along the way.
Yeah, that's great. Gina, Yonida, could you tell us about interesting legal niches and specialties for foreign lawyers in Canada?
Yonida, why don't you start off on that one? Because I'm going to take a bit of an old school modern approach to it, but I'm going to let you start off first. Thanks,
Gina. I actually, for this one, I put it on ChatGPT. I wanted to see what it was going to say. And actually, what it gave me is interesting legal niches and specialties for foreign trained lawyers in Canada include immigration, privacy, insurance, Aboriginal, environmental. So for me, I was trying to understand how the question is perceived. And legal niches is anything that is a specialty, in my opinion. But especially now that we see so many industries growing, like you talk about technology, but technology is just an industry. There are so many verticals. So you want to be doing educational technology, ed tech, or health tech, or fintech. So the legal niches can be, in my opinion, a mix of substantive law and also industry expertise. And but what I saw from being very specific, so you can definitely present yourself as someone who is an expert on NFTs or the metaverse, or because the underlying knowledge would be IP, corporate commercial, litigation, because you would be practicing the law of that industry. Or you would know the key players that can be potential clients, or you can understand and speak their language. But from what I saw when I was trying to find a job, is being too specific might not be as helpful, because what the advice that I received from everyone was try to understand what pays the bills of those law firms that are going to hire you. And it might not be that you are an expert on NFTs and metaverse. It might be the fact that you're willing to do whatever the firm needs to pay the bills. And then when I was approaching new lawyers, I started becoming a bit broader, and I said I wanted to technology law, but at the same time, and corporate commercial, M&A, because I understood that that's what paid the bills. It's not the technology contracts that I would draft. And that opened more doors. So what I would say is it's helpful to be specific because people can connect you to opportunities, but also show that you're willing to do something a bit broader that falls in the same bucket of experience. For example, don't tell people that you want to do litigation and corporate, because it seems like you're not specific enough. But don't tell them but you can tell them that I want to do corporate as the general umbrella, corporate commercial, but I want to specialize in fintech, or I want to specialize in technology transactions. So this would be my approach from what I've seen.
I love, Yonida, that you actually put it into ChatGPT. I think that's an incredible new way that many people are looking at it. But what I took away from that is that some of the more traditional routes came out from ChatGPT. And what do I mean by that? If you can be creative and innovative in an existing area of law, immigration, family law, there is, I wrote to Mykyta and to Yonida before, there's still a real large access to justice challenge in Canada. Citizens cannot afford legal services oftentimes, basic legal services. And so finding creative, technologically supportive ways of being able to service communities, whether it's in any community for that matter, on fundamental legal matters, whether it's immigration, criminal, family law, business law, being able to find creative ways of doing so and using technology oftentimes more efficiently, more effectively, more affordably, I think is something to think about as well. So don't just think about the particular area that is the most sexy or popular right now. Yes, of course, AI or privacy may be in the news, but I can tell you 15, 20 years ago, environmental was a big issue, and it still is, but you want to be able to find an area of law that you can work with, that you enjoy, that you're interested in, but how do you serve that in a way that might be different? A few years back, and I think you might know him, a few years back, a person decided to open up, if you don't know what Walmart is, they're major shopping stores across North America. He decided to open up law offices in Walmart, which was in itself innovative because nowhere before had Walmart had law offices, and he was able to offer at bulk rates wills to the people who would come by and buy their things at Walmart in a way that made sense. And so thinking innovatively and creatively could be either about a new practice area or about an existing practice area and doing it differently. And I see some questions, so I don't want to take up more time. Sorry, Mykyta.
Yeah, and by the way, it's interesting to know, except ChatGPT, what else legal tech tools do you use in your legal career?
I can start with that. So when I mentioned that I leverage my experience to find the position that I'm at, is because I had worked in legal innovation in roles that included knowledge management, client service innovation, and I have legal tech experience with a startup. And when I joined the firm, and it was the pandemic, and I started by having some conversations with the managing partner of the firm that I'm now at, and he showed me what he had built. So he showed me all these amazing tools about how he does the flow of a client. That someone finds us online, they click on a button, they submit a question, that question is taken through our internal CRM, customer management system. It sends a notification in Slack, someone gets it, they assign it to a lawyer, an automated email is sent to that person saying, thank you so much for reaching out, here's my Calendly, book something. Then I see that email on my calendar and I speak with that person, and all of that I spent zero time. So when I started meeting, when we were discussing with the managing partner, I started asking questions based on what I'd seen, and he appreciated the insight. And his question, after we talked a bunch of times, and he had initially said, "I'm not looking to hire someone," was, "Would you be willing to join us on a contract basis?" And he's like, "It seems like you know some things that we don't know. Are you willing to teach us those things, and we can teach you how to become a technology lawyer?" And this was the premise. This is how I started working for the firm. And he asked me, "What would be the ideal role for you?" And I told myself, I have nothing to lose. I'm going to say it. It's a hybrid of a lawyer that also is an innovation specialist. So the role has changed since, but part of my job also includes evaluating software, building software. We have a developer as part of our team, and thinking creatively about how you provide products to clients, legal services as products. So like Gina said, you're at Walmart, you're shopping, and you're shopping for a wheel as well. If it's easy for me, I would buy it. So this is how we're thinking about it. And the way we've gone about it is to see technology as something that facilitates legal practice, but also can facilitate the client interaction. So we have software that helps lawyers docket their time without thinking about it. I think I spent 0.2 or 0.3 on this. You have a software that says call and it tracks the minutes and you could just submit it. Or you can group it because you also drafted something and you did something else and you can submit it at the end without thinking. So we help lawyers this way. Also, we have knowledge management tools where we help develop precedents or internal systems like Notion. I'm not sure who knows about Notion, but I have all my life Notion. It's a project management tool, and I can add a task. I can add an event that I'm planning with steps or with links or with a calendar. And the same thing we do on a firm basis where we have our practice notices where you can see things and you can update, and also who's working on a matter, and you can see it because everyone updates that page of like, I spoke with the client, I drafted this document, here's where we're at. And someone doesn't need to call me and waste time. They can see where things are at. So there are these tools where we help lawyers become more efficient. And then there are the tools for the clients, like how do you interact with them? Like online questionnaires. We don't have to have a call. They can just submit the questionnaire and I can ask some follow-up questions and it's done. And the next big thing that I'm helping with is contract automation, which is going to be the next thing if we want to improve efficiency. Because I'd rather spend the time strategizing with a client than just changing their names in the legal documents. That can be done by automation. So this is some examples of how you can use software. There are a lot of options out there. There is AI is used in due diligence. So there are so many software that help with that as well. I'm happy to chat with anyone that has any questions about this. I'm very passionate about this, but as we said with Gina, you have to stop us because I can talk about this for hours. So this is what I'm going to say for now.
Yonida, I think one of the comments that I would make is that when we talk about skills, some of the provincial skills requirements, not Ontario yet, now I'm blanking if Ontario has gone that far, they're actually indicating technological skills as a minimum requirement for lawyers. So, you may not have the breadth of skills that Yonida has, for example, but being able to understand the impact that technology can have on your client service, on your own practice management, and the different components. She gave you some examples is really critical. So for anybody who may not have some fundamental foundational technological skills, Yonida, you said something at the very beginning. If you don't know how to send an appointment calendar with a Zoom, a calendar with a Zoom link to it, that's sort of foundational. But you'll be surprised how many lawyers would see that as, oh my God, how wonderful that you have it. So if you don't have that, at least get to that level.
Absolutely, I think that was a very good point.
Okay. By the way, what do you think about updating from Microsoft AI? Maybe you already use it, or what do you think about it? If you face up with these new products from Microsoft artificial intelligence.
I haven't yet used other than OpenAI, which I'm using almost every day. Notion also had an integration with this, so you can ask Notion AI to generate something like an email or to explain something, or you add a link and tell you, give me a summary of this. It's pretty good from what I've seen, the applications of OpenAI. So I think it's going to be part of everyday life now.
Yeah. Okay. So I'd like to talk with you about transformation of the legal market in Canada. What new directions and opportunities are opening up in 2023? It's artificial intelligence, as we mentioned previously, and intellectual property of bloggers, influencers, copywriting, and so on. Could you tell us some words about it?
I'm going to link a question that I see in the chat with the answer to this, because I think there's such movement and such change. The one thing that we know that is there's constant change, but some things also, one of the things in North America, law is somewhat slow to change. So I saw a question, I just want to be able to address it. The advantages and disadvantages of big law or small law firm. I don't think there's a clear-cut answer, Olha, to that question. There are certainly some advantages of big law. For example, you have certain resources. They may be engaged in certain work that people would find exciting. There are national and international breadth to it, and so there is that possibility. But small firms, I oftentimes hear students and new lawyers saying, I need to go for that large firm. Don't discount the smaller firms, the experience that you can get at the smaller firms, building your professional identity, building that skill base in areas by yourself or with a little bit of support, and being able to actually get hands-on practice right from the get-go. And the willingness to change, it's so much easier for a smaller firm to make changes and to make pivots than a larger firm sometimes. So there's not a good or bad, but there are some pros and cons. And I just would ask that you don't discount smaller firms. I think there's some really incredible opportunities. Yonida, I know that you've had sort of both experiences, so why don't you share either in the first question, but also in this question.
Thanks, Gina. I was going to add, because I also saw a question and I was also going to use it as an opportunity to answer. And what I would add is, I see here that a question from Maxime. Can you recommend positions in the legal field for the lawyers without Canadian experience? What I did, and I didn't have Canadian experience, but I used the LLM to do an internship. And that internship allowed me to work with the knowledge management team of a big firm, and I helped them with precedents, with testing. I think it was Kira Systems, which is machine learning. You feed it documents and you train it how to read those documents. And there are so many positions out there to facilitate the lawyers, from like the business development team of law firms, from the innovation team of those law firms, or even the banks, from the risk assessment, compliance, privacy. So just speaking with lawyers that work in those departments, they can share more about what their colleagues are doing, and they can put you in touch. And I also saw another comment about the job boards. And what I would say is, when you're applying for a job, it's you and 100, 200 other people. So the competition is very high. And you probably know that they would go for someone with experience in Canada, or at least this is what I realized after sending 100 applications and hearing 0. So this way, when you approach someone that works somewhere and you tell them, can you connect me with your colleague that does this? You can end up with a contract that you can put your foot at the door, you can meet that department, you can meet the lawyers of that law firm, and then gradually transition into working for the law firm while you understand the market. So this is how I would approach it. And in terms of legal niches, oh my God, just ask ChatGPT. But what I'm seeing a lot now is crypto asset trading platforms. It's becoming a huge area where people don't know how to navigate it, but it requires securities knowledge. So you can understand the developments, but you need that fundamental knowledge on the legal side. NFT, metaverse, generative AI, these are all industries that are booming. There is some hype, of course, because last year everyone was in the metaverse and this year we forgot about it. Again, we have 2 more minutes and I don't want to elaborate too much, but I was going to say, meet the people, and then in terms of where the niches are and where the development, you would hear about them. It's impossible to miss.
Yeah, great. Thank you. In your opinion, where is the legal market heading globally? In which trend will prevail? I mean, large legal corporation that will merge and acquire all small and medium-sized firms, or freelance fragmentation of the market into narrow specialists who will succeed through building a strong personal brand on social media?
You saved the toughest question for last, didn't you?
Gina, do you have a crystal ball? Because this is
I know that exactly. Where is it going? I think, wow, that was a tough question. And my comment would be to pick up on your last thing. I think if individuals can have their own brand, can create and develop their own brand and expertise, they will be able to stay ahead no matter where they are, because I do think we're going to see some changes. I don't think law firms as in Canada as we currently have them, where they're only by lawyers, is going to continue for too much longer. We will be seeing some changes on a broader scale, but fundamentally, when you think about what lawyers are doing, they're serving people. They're serving people as the people's needs change. And so being aware of that, staying in tune with what that is, and building your own brand and expertise on a continuous basis is only going to stand people in good stead as they move forward. Yeah, no crystal ball, Yonida.
I totally agree, Gina. And what I would add is that a law firm is a platform. It's you're building your expertise, people recognize you, and you want to see what is the best environment for you to grow. And that environment could be a small firm where you can manage your clients, and you have that support, or it may be a large firm that can connect you to international clients, and you name it. You can see different files because the support is different. In larger firms, the clients may be of more national, international exposure, or in the smaller firms, you may have that immediate experience because you work on files and you have hands-on experience. But it's up to you to choose, and different stages in life may bring you closer to different things. So if you have the experience which you gain at a bigger firm or a smaller firm, you may want to experience something different. You may want to go in-house. That's also a growing trend. Companies would rather pay for someone as a resource than paying fees to outside counsel. So I don't see it as a small firm, a large firm, or I see it as different stages in life. You may be at different places getting different skills.